Okay, this is Mark Krueger. I'm here today to present this 2015 update on building codes and regulations that I presented to the BOMA group of Metro Detroit. BOMA is the Building Owners and Managers Association. I presented it on April 2nd with Wayne Jewell, and the questions that we presented answers to them on are given here. An introduction of who we are and why they should care about the building codes. Quick update on where we're at with building codes today, and then a little bit on what they actually need to know to use the building code in their practice, and then finally how they can get involved. So Wayne Jewell is a building code official. He used to be in Southfield, Michigan, now in Green Oaks Township. He's been active for decades with the building code development process, which is currently done through the ICC, the International Codes Committee. And I am Mark Krueger. I'm a principal at Wisjani-Elsner, currently in Bingham Farms, Michigan. I've been working with building codes through my entire career, about 29 years now, and recently have been on the ad hoc committee for the state of Michigan, where they review the model code from the ICC and adopt it as the Michigan codes. So briefly, I guess why I believe you should care about these things. There's a lot of money involved in code requirements. BOMA has done a great deal of work at the national level to affect the ICC codes, and they feel that they have been able to bring about some substantial cost savings, both in making changes to the current codes, but then also, as shown here, they have been able to keep out some of the changes that have been proposed that would be quite expensive to implement. I see that they show here they were estimating about $3.50 a square foot. I think they now believe it's closer to $6 a square foot that they've been able to save building owners through the changes they've kept out of the code. Just a little bit on the code cycle. I refer to that. I probably need to give everyone a little background. Codes 101, how do we develop and adopt building codes in the U.S.? First of all, there's a model building code that currently they're developed by the International Codes Council. In years past, there had been several different groups that developed and promulgated model building codes, but they all came together back about 20 years ago, and since then there's just been really one model building code that's used pretty universally throughout the United States. They have a 3-year cycle, so every 3 years they come out with a new set of codes, an updated set of codes, and after they have developed them, then adopting them, Michigan takes those model codes and they review the changes that have been made and incorporate them into the administrative rules that are the Michigan Building Code. We have the advantage here in Michigan that the entire state is under the same code. In other states, each municipality can adopt their own code, but in Michigan it's one uniform code throughout the state. Both in the development process and in the adoption process, BOMA has opportunity to influence that. BOMA International influences the development process by having some of their staff active with ICC. And here in the state of Michigan, any of you individually can influence the process by submitting code change proposals. You can also volunteer to be on the ad hoc review committee. So graphically then, you have this cycle, code development on the left and code adoption on the right, and you can see that On each side of that, that circle, there are a number of opportunities that you can exercise some influence on in committee hearings and voting that takes place. ICC, all of the voting is done by officials that are involved in building and fire safety. So you can talk to your local building official. A lot of times they will be one of the voting members on ICC, so you can influence the development process that way. On the code adoption side, like I said, there is the ad hoc code review committee. There are also public hearings on the proposed rules, so you have opportunity to influence the process there as well. But it is a cycle, and there's constantly these 3-year cycles going on. There's electrical, there's mechanical, there's structural. They overlap. It becomes just a real churn of information going through. There's a lot of code development and code adoption work going on simultaneously all the time, and it's sometimes hard to figure out where you're at in the process and where you can step in to have some influence. A little simpler, if we just look at Michigan, this is a list of where we're at with the different codes that are in force here in Michigan. You can see that we're currently working here in 2015. The electrical code has already been reviewed and is going to be adopted later this year, the 2014 electrical code. The residential codes, the energy code and the residential construction code, are just about ready to come up for public hearing. That'll be in May, and they will be in force shortly after that. We're just getting started. The ad hoc review committee is just starting to review the mechanical and plumbing codes, and the next round of building code, existing building code, will be coming up, and they have not yet scheduled the ad hoc code committee review for those. So now a little bit on what you should want to know about using the current building code. We thought we would present this by giving you a few examples. There's 3 examples that we have on working with the current building code. The first one is avoiding means of egress issues during tenant improvements or other types of alterations in a building. The next one is how to define work areas so that you can use the existing building code to limit the amount of code upgrade work that you need to do. And then finally, sometimes when you do get into additional work that has to be done to bring a building up to current code. So first, taking a look at this circumstance where this is actually something that Wayne had worked on. We're going to try to use the existing building code to avoid a means of egress, the exit pathway out of a building. It's important to know that there's a relatively new concept in means of egress called common path of travel. I've shown here kind of an arrow greater than 100 feet. So you're supposed to limit that common path of travel to less than 100 feet. So from the most remote point to the point at which you have 2 exits available to you needs to be less than 100 feet. It's a new concept just since 2000, but it does affect, for building owners and managers, it affects tenant build-out, which are classified as alteration level 2 in the existing building code. But there is an exception. It's important to know that in existing construction, we generally consider that a building that was built safely under the code when it was built is still considered safe today. So generally when we are working with that building, we don't have to bring the entire building up to the current construction code, and this would be one of those opportunities where you can use this exception in the existing building code and basically circumvent that 100-foot limitation as long as the building official agrees that it's not a distinct hazard to life. The next idea is to figure out how you want to work to stay between the lines. In general, when you're working on an existing building and making changes, you can define a work area. And so within that work area, there are certain code requirements that you need to meet. Outside of that work area, you're allowed to leave the building as it was originally constructed. So again, this is another project that Wayne worked on, renovation just in the first floor lobby in a 1960s building. The exit stairs from the upper floors came down into the lobby, and there are no sprinklers and there's no fire separation from this lobby to the adjacent spaces. Those are requirements that you would see in the current building code. So to avoid having to do more work outside of the work area that they've defined, they considered just putting in fire separation between the lobby and the rest of the building. But because of the open concept of the floor plan, that did not work out well for them. So they chose to install sprinklers throughout the first floor. But that doesn't really mean that you have a work area that covers the whole floor. It's really, you can do incidental work outside of the work area without having to bring the entire first floor up to the current code requirements. The next project that we want to look at is one that I worked on, where we had a fairly large auditorium, a 10,000 square foot auditorium, built about 15 years ago in 1999. An important distinction is that in the last few years, sprinkler requirements have changed considerably in auditoriums. So much smaller auditoriums need sprinklers now than they did even just 15 years ago. So things can happen that might bring about some changes in a building. One of the things we work on a lot is fire damage. So if you have a small fire in an auditorium like this, you can do repairs, and the existing building code allows you to classify those as repairs, and really just tells you that you need to use like materials, similar materials to what was there, maintain your means of egress and your fire protection. So there's really not a lot of code changes that are required in making repairs. If you want to instead make some alteration to your auditorium, for instance, if you wanted to create a more distinct entry space, so you wanted to put in a wall, that would be what the existing building code would classify as an alteration level 2. But again, that work area concept, you're allowed to define a work area as I've shown here, and then you really only have to meet the current code requirements in that work area. So then you would put sprinklers just in that small triangular area, and you wouldn't have to put sprinklers throughout the entire auditorium space. But then another relatively small change that you might make would be to actually add an entry. So now you're increasing the floor plan of the building. That would be classified as an addition in the existing building code. But then you would hit that allowable size that's in the code, where it has decreased over time from 12,000 square feet down to 5,000 square feet. So now you have this large contiguous space that is your auditorium that would exceed that 5,000 square feet. So then the code would indicate that you'd either have to put fire sprinklers in throughout that building, or you would have to make the interior wall of your addition a firewall to make it a distinct, make the entry a distinct fire area, which then of course would require fire doors, not usually what you'd want as an entrance to an auditorium. So here we paused for a few questions, and I don't know, Mike, did you have questions that you wanted to ask here? I guess not, so we will just continue on then. The next thing is to take a look at what some of the biggest changes are coming for the building code. In the 2015 ICC codes, we have a number of significant changes. If you're really interested in what's changing, there is a book published by ICC that documents all the significant changes. It's probably about 150-page long book this cycle. Just a couple of the highlights. One of the big things in the building code is that there had been a Chapter 34 that addressed code requirements for existing buildings. That is going to go away in the 2015 edition, so that you will now always refer to the separate international existing building code. Another common change these days, seems to be becoming more common, is having assembly spaces on a roof. I know the Detroit Opera House has such an assembly space. The codes are really working hard to try to catch up to some of this current trend, and so they've included some additional requirements for building construction, which includes, for instance, sprinklers being installed throughout the building to give those people on the roof opportunity to get down from the roof to the level of discharge. Another change is an additional requirement to obtain a new certificate of occupancy when you have a change in building use. It's common to have changes, say, from one type of assembly, a small number of people to a larger number of people. Sometimes changes in use, such as shown here, a building, a residential building that becomes a business use. Another significant change has to do with horizontal building separation, a type of construction they call pedestal buildings, where you have a different use on the first floor or the first several floors than you do from those above it. A lot of times this would be commercial or retail space on the first floors, or parking on the lower floors, and maybe residential units up above. So there's a change now that allows you to go more than a story above grade to have a taller pedestal to your pedestal building. Another change has to do with the support of fire walls. In general, you've had, if you have a floor that is providing some lateral support to your firewall, those have in the past always had to have the same fire rating as the firewall. They've relaxed that requirement at this point to make it, in this particular example, so the floors could have a 1-hour rating when the wall has a 2-hour rating. And then finally, in Chapter 17, there is definition there of special inspections that are required. This is a relatively new concept. It's only been in the building code since about 2000. The idea being that structurally significant portions of the building require special inspections to make sure they are constructed according to the design drawings. Since it's a relatively new concept, they've been developing this idea further as the years have gone by, and they've made some additional changes in this last cycle to provide some more specific requirements for that. A quick look at some of the other changes that are coming. One would be with the International Green Construction Code, the IGCC. Basically, ICC was trying to develop a code that would be an equivalent and alternative to LEED type construction. They're working together with AIA, the American Institute of Architects, and also with ASHRAE, the American Society of Heating and Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Engineers. And they're trying to make some changes to this code. They're going to work together, develop a new standard that will then become the basis for that construction code. Although it is expected at this point that that would continue to be a voluntary code, not a mandatory requirement, although some municipalities have considered making it mandatory. Another thing we bring up every year as we go through code changes here with BOMA is discussion of state legislation that affects building codes and the other building regulations. The good news to report is currently there is not any pending state legislation that will be affecting the building codes. And then finally, just to wrap up, how can you become involved in building code, both on the development and on the adoption side? You want to keep in mind always that there's those two different phases, kind of the national effort that's going on at ICC. They are currently meeting in Memphis right now with code hearings discussing the proposed changes that will be incorporated into the 2018 building codes. BOMA International has representatives at ICC. They have people at those meetings offering testimony at those hearings. So they have some influence at that level. Here on the state level, as I mentioned, you can certainly volunteer to be on the ad hoc code review committee. You can offer to them any code changes that you would like to see. And then you also have opportunity once those code changes are incorporated into the Michigan administrative rules. There is opportunity for public comments, so you can be involved there as well. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to send those to me. And that's all I have, Mike.
Thank you very much, Mark.
You're welcome.